is now 2:31. This is a regularly scheduled Fort Myers Beach Management and Planning session. All members of council are present with Councilor King via remote, town manager, town attorney, town clerk. If you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Joe's going to lead us in that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, before we start, we need to take we need a motion to approve the appearance of Councilor King via remote in a grass court somewhere in Hawaii.
So moved.
I'll second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously. All right, our first item for discussion is the Metro forecasting model. Come on up. I don't have your name in here, sir, so I can't tell everybody what your name is.
Mr. Mayor, my name is David Farmer. Happy to please. All right. Good afternoon. My name is David Farmer. I am the CEO of Metro Forecasting Models. We are a data analysis and forecasting company. We work exclusively for governments such as yours. We never work for developers. When we say something we want you to know, it comes from our heart or from the data we have, not because someone paid us to say that. We always let the data do the talking. Today I'm standing on the shoulders of my partner, Dr. Paul Van Buskirk. He invented the interactive growth model, which is the signature tool we use for forecasting purposes. Well, we can do forecasting for you, and we should do some forecasting. Our data that goes into that forecasting is very useful for other purposes, and that's the subject of really what I want to talk about today. My partner and I are both licensed professional engineers, both certified city planners, and I have a master's in public administration with an emphasis on fiscal neutrality. The issue you brought up with parking, we call that a policy issue, and I studied that for my master's on how to make sure towns, villages, and cities and counties can keep their budgets fiscally neutral and not go over budget. So excellent stuff. Next slide, please. All right. So what if you knew how things would develop? And with that said,
Sir, could you just take 1 second
Yeah.
and set the table as to why you're here, how you got to be here? Tell us a little background as to just to give us.
I tell you what, let me go back to a
Yeah.
year and 2 days ago. How's
Okay.
that?
Yeah.
So a year and 2 days ago, I had a meeting via Zoom, I think, with your town manager, because I was working for the Lee MPO doing the 2050 LRTP, the Long Range Transportation Plan, which means I'm forecasting all of your residential, all of your commercial, industrial, and needs for public facilities and so forth, so that they can size the roads properly and all of that. As part of that discussion, I worked with Sarah Probst before, and that got into discussion talking about the data for the town and such, and that led to an introduction to Judith, which led to more discussions about the type of data that we provide and how it might be useful for you to use for making some decisions or trying to figure things out. For example, I was watching the hearing this morning, and you guys have a lot of information, albeit one-sided, pushed at you. We offer data analysis on a more objective level. Not that your staff isn't objective, but we provide objective data so you can maybe evaluate either on a project level or just overall how you want your town to grow or not grow and what it might look like.
So we're happy you're here. So you're here to kind of pitch your services, or are you actually giving us a formal report that we've already paid for or requested? Or a little of both?
More about just a pitch. I'm going to show you some of the data we did for.
I don't mean as a pejorative. You're just trying to understand what's happening here.
I'm introducing myself to the town,
Okay.
so you know who we are, and I think our services could be very useful to you, but it's your decision.
No, that's okay. That
that's
helps me. I just didn't know the background.
So-
Yeah.
Can I do a statement? Oh, yeah, thank you. So I actually thought that it might be a good idea to have Dave talk about this because in a lot of our conversations we're talking about for example, you've talked about wanting chiropractors, dentists, hairdressers, things like that. Trying to figure out how much commercial is really possible, what's realistic, what kind of parking we need, what kind of demand we're gonna have in the future. I mean, this plays into all of our infrastructure, water, commercial needs, and we don't have a good idea of where we're at. So I started talking to Dave about that aspect, hearing that he was involved with Lee County. So that's why I thought it might be a good idea, and then sort of talked to Judith about it, and we all kind of thought at least we would have Dave come in and let you guys hear what he does and what his company does, and if it seemed like something that we needed to sort of get a grasp on where we're at and where we're going.
It sure sounds like a good idea. It's just helpful background. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yep.
And for what it's worth, I served for a year. I was the only consultant that I know of that served on the Lee County Resilient Task Force that turned into that $1.3 billion. I was asked to sit on that on behalf of Cape Coral. They're one of our clients as well. And so I'm fairly entrenched in Lee County. I understand a lot of the issues. I'm not a know-it-all. I have been coming to this beach for over 35 years. I used to own land up on the north end of the island. Sold it just before COVID, and before some of the hurricanes too. Thank goodness. But so I know this town, I think, very well. I'm not trying to say I'm one of you, but I know this town very well. I care a lot about it, and so forth.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, and so because we're data people, we do a lot of work in GIS, Geographic Information Systems. So we, what if you had a map of your vacant land? Spoiler, I'm going to show you one at the end. However, I want you to preface this with, I don't have any data from yesterday on you. Our data for you basically dates back to about October of 23. When we did that's when we pulled the data to do the work for the Lee County MPO. But I think you'll see some interesting things in that data. So we can also help by providing you access to data and mapping to communicate your policies, or show you sometimes when we do our analysis, we'll show you what your policies mean. You don't like it, that's fine. We're not saying this is how it is. We're saying, well, if your policies were implemented across the board, this is what it might look like. And you might go, ooh, I don't like that picture. Great, let's change the policies. But we're here to make you aware, help show how things might turn out. There's that law of unintended consequences. We try to help demonstrate and show you those things. Next slide. Actually, the bottom part of that slide is very interesting. So one of the things we do is we do population estimates. I know Beaver does that for free. We're more accurate. I'm nailing down every doorknob of every unit on the island, and we're applying the proper demographics spatially across. Most people use one size fits all. We've got, I think, you've broken into like 25 different pieces with different demographics for each section. We can also do transient population. Most people want to say, well, it's 2.5 people per this. No. We're actually analyzing every hotel room and its occupancy and that sort of thing. And then we also monitor your seasonal residents. So that those are not only the ones that are renting units, but people that own property but live here less than 180 days a year. And we have those parcels pretty well broken down, basically at the parcel level throughout the city or town. For what it's worth, we've also used to work, 4 years ago, we worked for Holmes Beach. One of the things they had that I thought was very interesting is they had every room that you could rent, you have to register with the town. I know because I'm a former property owner here that you require people that rent to register with the fire department so they know it's safe and everything. But I want to drop that idea on you just to think about if you had it by a room, because what's interesting then, if I know they have 2 rooms, well now I know, okay, well 1 or 2 visitors per room, you can start to see how the peak population might really change. One of the things we don't have access to is the VBRO and the Airbnb type of stuff. That information is very difficult to get our hands on. Now we're very aware of your condos, your condo hotels, and that sort of thing, and we know how to analyze those for purposes. Hope that wasn't too much in the weeds. Next slide. So if you want to know pre-Ian, the housing, I have probably about 20 different data sets because of different clients we work for. Every time we work for a client, we pull a new data set from Lee County, and sometimes things change a lot, sometimes not very much. But my point is we could actually go back in time and say, well, this is what you had then, this is what you have now. If that's of interest to you, not trying to push it or say you need that, but we have that kind of capability. Next slide. So we only work for government. So you see the city of St. Cloud, Sarah and I both work for them. City of Naples, Village of Estero, we do their impact fee forecasting. So we don't do the impact fees, but we forecast how their impact fee revenues are going to change over time so they can properly budget for that. And of course the city of Cape Coral and the city of Auburn did some school district stuff for that. Next slide. So Lee County has been using our data since at least 2015, if not even 2010, for their LRTPs. City of Cape Coral has been using us since 2007. My partner, Paul Van Buskirk, in 2010, there was an article, the census had just come out, and they said that our data was as accurate as a crystal ball. I think we nailed it within 150 people. It's pretty good, especially when you have 150,000 people. So the Village of Estero, we helped with their very first data analysis for their very first comp plan. And then we've been working for the city of Fort Myers since 2020, doing their utility work. We're not doing the utility design, we're providing the population data so they can properly size their facilities and so forth. And then Lee County Utilities, we help with their septic to sewer conversion analysis, again, on the people side of things. Next slide. So what we try to do, our goal is to help local governments such as yourself understand how growth might occur and in essence help manage that growth, again, by looking at your policies. What do they say? What do you not like? How would you like to change that? And then implement, someone like Sarah to implement the policy to do so. So the goal of our data is to help you plan long range and understand what your capital needs may be. Now I realize with this last with Milton and Helene going through that there's a lot of capital needs. We don't forecast for hurricanes. Sorry, we don't do that. However, during those, if you guys want to look at me on LinkedIn, you can look me up. We were broadcasting. We were taking NOAA's GIS layers and laying them across all the counties on the West Coast and predicting who would be under at least 3 feet of water, the number of housing units, and the value of not the land, but the structures on top of them. It was in the many, many billions, trying to let people know what might happen in the process. Our signature tool is the interactive growth model. That's what we use to forecast both population growth and the need for additional public facilities such as parks, schools, fire stations, and that sort of thing. I realize you guys don't have your own fire stations. That's a separate special district, fine, but we can still help analyze those things. I'm not so sure you need those, but we have that capability. And my goal is never to try to sell you something you don't need, just tell you, offer the services that we have, and you guys can pick and choose what you like and don't. So I was, again, try to say that me and my employees, we have owned property on Fort Myers Beach. We've worshipped here, we've played here. I remember in 2008, confession, I didn't discover the shrimp festival until 2008. We got stuck just about a mile down the road where there was a nice police officer saying, you can't go any further. I mean, I can't, it's 8 o'clock on Saturday morning, what do you mean I can't go any further? So we learned the very hard way, but from that year on, we never missed the shrimp cabbage until 2020, of course, the shrimp cabbage festival. Just a wonderful time. My son was 4 when we started coming out for that, and had a great time. We really do understand the unique history of the town even before it was a town. Yeah, not that we know it all, but there's a lot we've witnessed over the years firsthand by being here and seeing how things have evolved and developed. And we think that we pretty much understand the residents' concerns about growth and so forth. And sometimes we can help them understand what's good. Sometimes, we suggest sometimes if you had more commercial in this location, it would actually reduce traffic. I know it sounds like an oxymoron, but sometimes the right thing in the right location can cut down on trip lengths or trips that can actually ease congestion and so forth. To just go off the rails for just a second, one of the things, so when we analyze neighborhood shopping centers, which are private facilities, they're not public, right? A Publix, something like a Publix, it takes 15,000 people to support one of those. I'm about to show you in the next slide or two, you have about 6,700, maybe 6,800 full-time. That was actually pre-Milton and Helene or so, something like that.
No, that was pre-Ian.
Pre-Ian?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so that population you see is about half of what it takes to support that. And so I know that this is a free society and people can do what they want, but the more we could encourage a few more permanent people to live here, I think it would help support some of the businesses that you'd like to see here. It's very difficult to do an urgent care. We did some analysis with Lee County, and we found that just like a neighborhood shopping center, it takes nearly 15,000 people to support a permanent urgent care facility. So I know in peak season there's, it feels like 20,000 people, right? But we need enough people here year-round in order to support those uses, and that's sort of one of the challenges, I think, that for the town. So we can evaluate, and by evaluate structures, it's not the structural things that engineers do. Oh, we've got cracks, that's not what we do. But we can evaluate, tell you exactly how many housing units, what type they are, where we have vacant land, and how that vacant land might develop. We can do it by different things. We can use average densities, we can use maximum code. I'm not trying to scare anyone. We could say, well, what if this wasn't here? What if there was maximum code rebuilt? It could be a very large number. I don't know about doing the analysis. We can also I was just talking about the document how existing commercial goods and services, we can document what's here, but then we can help advise too on what would help to support businesses and be here more on a year-round basis. And then, of course, what's the collective impact of all these future projects coming on? How are they likely to change the level of service for various things like utilities or parks or whatever, whatever you want to measure in the city, in the town, excuse me. And then what if certain land uses were converted? What if residential was converted to commercial, commercial back to residential and so forth? Because sometimes we call that land use allocation, and sometimes things can be out of balance. I don't necessarily think that things are out of balance right now, but that can be one of the tools. I'll bring up the term substantial competent evidence. Our model and our analysis has been used as substantial competent evidence to help make decisions about whether a project is right for the municipality or not. Instead of just saying, I don't like it, you can look at a piece of data and say, well, this data says that project isn't well supported. The need's not there, or the impacts are too great, or whatever that might be. It's not arbitrary, but it is a source of information for the town. Next. So we can help answer questions. What if another, natural disaster wiped out everything on that? That's just a very extreme example. What if everything got knocked down? I know at one point we were looking at FEMA numbers that just made me sick to my stomach. I was looking at 10 to 11 feet across the entire island. Thank goodness that didn't turn out that way. But some of those maps FEMA was putting out, we were modeling. It was just breathtaking what it could have been. Actually, the hair standing up on the back of my neck right now talking about it. How can you maximize the return on investment of city-owned property or even privately owned property so that it's generating the most taxes possible, most revenue possible for the town? Side note is we also do fiscal impact analysis, again, only for governments. We're working for the city of Fort Myers right now, and we regularly do analysis for the town of the city of St. Cloud, so they can understand annexations or whether projects are worth being approved or not. And then the question, and this probably doesn't really apply to you, but when you were doing Margaritaville, project of pretty large scale, we can help tell you if it's going to trip over the need for additional public services or not. My gut instinct, looking at up and down the beach and the vacant land, no one project is going to probably move the needle, but that, planners that work for developers call that a de minimis impact. But I call it death by 1,000 cuts, right? And if you get enough, they're all minor, but minor, and you're bleed to death. And so we'll help you understand that. Where's the tipping point for some of these things? Next slide, please. Here's the data I was going to show you. So, as of the property appraiser's data, you had about 2,100 single-family homes. This would be, again, in late 2023. We did our best by studying the aerial photography and to try to identify. We actually have NOAA's photography about 3 or 4 days after Ian hit. So we were trying to identify which houses were no longer there. We assumed if a house was there for the purposes of the MPO, remember I don't have a very large budget, that if a house got knocked down, that a house would get rebuilt. We now know in some cases a house gets knocked down and maybe something more intense comes back in its place. We also measured just under 6,500 multifamily units. That's not to be confused, so you look at the Pink Shell, right? That's a condo hotel. In normal parlance, that's going to be recorded as a condo. We actually recognize it as a hotel. And so we pull that, so we don't record that as a multifamily, we record the Pink Shell as actually hotel units because that's what they're being used for. We note that you had about 35 acres of vacant commercial land based on our analysis, and 0 acres of industrial land, which makes sense for a town like Fort Myers Beach, right? This is not an industrial sort of, there's better uses of the land here than for industrial purposes in the most part. And you had about 2,277 hotel rooms. Now, with all that said, I think the occupancy was probably less than half of what we're showing you here. Shortly after Ian, even when you look up and down the beach now, there's a lot of things that aren't occupied. Next slide. This is, I think, the last slide. So this is the vacant land that we had recorded as of, again, about December of 2023. You might know of other lands that are vacant. Sometimes there's a lag in the data, and so if we don't have real-time satellite aerial photography, it can be difficult to assess some of those things out. But you see a fair amount of black, and that black, in my business, that we call that currency, right? Because vacant land, you can change things. With no vacant land, you're sort of hemmed in, and you can't change anything at all. So we look at this as an opportunity for the town to grow the way they want to and see the things they want to see without a Bert Garris claim. With that said, I'm happy to answer any questions. I know when I get excited, I talk quickly. I'm not a fast talker per se. I get excited.
Could have fooled me. You're talking pretty fast.
I also know you guys have been here all day too.
Vice Mayor? Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, this is great, because we are starved for this kind of data, quite honestly, particularly the census data. How much of your data is dependent upon the US Census data? And if the numbers that you've come up with on your own, based on your modeling, if you had to compare them to previous, like pre-Ian numbers that don't use your modeling, how do they match up? And again, how much do you use the US Census Bureau data?
So as far as the census, we have great respect for the census. We tend to only use the demographic side of that, and some socioeconomic numbers, like number of children or things like that. What we do though is we count your housing units, and then we apply the spatial demographics to them. That's how we understand why this area is more seasonal than this one, or it isn't like on a housing basis, because these shapes are fairly large. I think there's like 25 different shapes that cover the sterile island itself. But what that means is we have 25 different flavors of different demographic household sizes, vacancy rates, seasonal vacancy rates. You don't have much group quarters around here, but it also breaks those out as well. So we use Lee County property appraiser data that we hand verify. By hand it sound expensive, but we don't just take their word for it. We actually go and verify, yep, that's a house, yep, that's a house. Oh, that's actually 3 houses. Let's change that in the data, make sure it's recording right, properly, and so forth. One of the challenges is going to be, and I'll have to work with the Lee County property appraiser, is that their data, there's often a 6-month lag. It's not like a month. It takes time to get everything into the system, and so the homes that were destroyed over the last 6 or 8 months or so, we're going to have to work to understand those so we get a proper accounting of what is there but what isn't actually there.
I know we're running late, so just one quick question, because you said something that really was interesting to me, and I'm trying to track your data. So I thought you said during off-season during season you predicted our population was around 20,000.
I'm just pulling that out of.
Okay, I was just going to say, anecdotally, we've heard over the years it's between 40, 50, 60 during season. That was pre-Ian, of course. Does that make sense to you, or do you have any sense as to what our population is now?
Off the cuff, I'm going to say no. But what you're referencing sounds more like what they call a daytime population, which is sort of voodoo. You take all your seasonal there, you take your transients, and then you take Lee Tran, and you say, well, how many times did the bus come over, and how many people are in the bus, and you start doing that to come up with some sort of analysis. I've spent many 4th of Julys up here. I have seen what you're talking about. There might be 60,000 people on here when you're talking about either a New Year's Eve or Chris.
Shrimp Fest?
Shrimp Fest, well, Shrimp Fest, that probably feels more like 35 or 40. And you got the bridge closed, right, for the race and such. But we can do that type of analysis. It's not overly difficult. We've already tracked all the hotel rooms and such and things. So I need to analyze it to know. The MPO doesn't necessarily care about peak population, so we don't go through all those machinations.
Thank you for being here.
Mm-hmm.
So as a follow-up to that question, so I think a lot of us are looking for data that, okay, once this hotel opens up, once this bar opens up, once this restaurant opens up, what does that translate into daily visitors? Can you track that?
We can use some data to estimate how that would change. They're always based on factors. I prefer using concrete things like how many seasonal visitors do we have, seasonal residents do we have, how many transient residents do we have, and then we can start backing into, okay, what about the people coming over the bridge that don't live here, aren't staying here, but are yet adding to that? And I think there's some analysis that we can do to help determine what that daytime population looks like.
And what it will be?
And
Yeah.
extrapolating to the future. So one of the things we did with Holmes Beach is we looked at what their beach capacity was, and that's a very fluid thing. Do you say, okay, I need 10 square feet per person, or in their case, we use the number of parking spaces to estimate, okay, how many people could this can the beach support based on the existing parking spaces? There's no end to what we can do, and if we think that it's going to lead to a number that's very squishy and unreliable, we're going to tell you up front that, yeah, we can do that for you, but I don't think that's going to be a number you're going to meet.
I think the other thing we're looking at too is we have so many condos. I don't know if you were here, that one guy said one of his buildings is going to open up in January, another February. We have dozens of condos in that situation. Can you get your hands on that data too? As you know, I know you can do it with houses, but can you track the condos that are coming back online?
So we know where all the condos are. Again, I would like to work with the Lee County property appraisers to understand which ones have been fully condemned. We realize that some have been condemned, but many appear to be very close to opening. If I had to guess, maybe 3 or 4 months, some of them, based on the drive up the beach.
That means 6 to 8.
And what?
That means 6 to 8.
It could be 6 to 8 materials and all that other fun stuff. But yes, we could, that's not, we've never been asked to do that, but I know exactly what you're talking, okay, as, I can't remember some of the condos, as, something arms, is there something arms?
Leonardo.
Leonardo Arms. As that comes online, okay, here's another 523 people or whatever, and keep going on down the line. And the seasonal component of that too, because we recognize too, most people don't use their units, 365. They often rent them out or just don't come back.
I'm curious to go a little more granular than that.
Okay, let's go.
So you'd said something in your presentation that was interesting to me, competent,
Competent, substantial evidence.
what
Yep.
she said.
Yep.
It's been a long day.
Yes, it
How
has.
can your data, or can your data, how granular can your data get with what is here, obviously, is what Councilor Safford was saying, but what is being projected? Let's say we've got someone that comes in with a proposal, we're gonna do whatever. Can your data take that, analyze it, and give us something that we could say, you're proposing X. This data that we got from you tells us that we don't have either the infrastructure or the resources or the services to provide what you're proposing, or what you're proposing with the benefits that you're providing is either overkill, not necessary, it's really not a benefit because you can support it based on your analysis. Can you get that granular to give us data to be able to help with that vision?
I don't want to say something that I can't do, but I want to say generically, yes. We work at the parcel level. We don't forecast at the parcel level. I don't know how many houses are going to have red doors, and I don't know, we don't know. I've got 10 lots. I can tell you that 3 of them are likely to develop by the end of the year, but I don't know which exactly 3 lots. But what you're talking about is taking a look and say a proposal. So now I have something fixed in front of me. We're going to build this many units, this many square feet. Okay, and then we can then work on and say, well, what are the impacts that result from that? What is the impact of traffic? And I don't want to do TIS statements and that kind of thing, but we can help review those sorts of things. They should be submitted as part of their approval packages, right? A transportation study and so forth. And we can help you tell you what the impact will be to the town's facilities, and that can be used to help you make decisions on whether that's best for the town or not.
And that can be used as evidence in a decision one way or another.
Yes, so basically your decisions that you make, they can't be generically arbitrary, discriminatory, or unreasonable. You are able to take the testimony of experts and based on qualifications that Mr. Farmer has, as Sarah and Jason and Judith as well, and rely on that testimony, and it would be based on their data and their analysis. And then so when you make a decision, let's say hypothetically to deny, it would be based on the delivery of evidence and testimony from an expert.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm getting at is it goes both ways, right? Whether it's approve or deny, but
Yeah.
you know, based on what you're offering to us, our data tells us that you really need a haircutting place, or you really need a dentist, or you really need, you know what I mean?
We're not that
Or-
level, but yeah.
But you get what I'm saying, or you need, you don't have enough of you don't have enough restaurants to support what this proposal is, or you have too many to support that, so what they're proposing really isn't a benefit, cause you can already support that. You see where I'm
Right.
getting at?
Right.
To help make decisions or help, I don't wanna use negotiation, but help with having a conversation with a proposal that comes before us.
Right.
Because I mean, our staff goes so far, but could this go further into recommendations than what our staff is capable of doing, or even help, right, but I mean, it'd be a piggyback to the recommendation.
It's quantitative data rather than qualitative, because you can say there's gonna be a traffic impact, he's gonna tell you how much, within a degree of, estimation and expertise, this is what the impact's gonna be.
Based on someone else's, looking at their TIS
Right.
against the background data.
Right.
That's not the specialty of what we do, TISs and things like that.
Right.
Oversell
So
that.
do you have a delta for hurricanes? So I know that if you take a town like Estero and they have so many empty lots and you know that the economy's good, you can forecast how that's gonna grow. But
Mhm.
down here, money's tighter, a little more expensive land.
Mhm.
Do you have a delta for the beach as far as regrowth?
No,
Because what we're finding out is we've all run into this. We all thought it was gonna be 3 to 5 years till we're back on our feet, but we all know it's gonna be 10. So do you have some type of delta there that
so let me
helps,
tell you-
that is just for Fort Myers Beach?
So let me tell you, so the direct answer is no, but let me tell you a quick story about me.
Okay.
So I left professional engineering in 2000. I went to work for my best client because she needed someone to build the projects that I had been designing for the last whatever years. And so I got baptized in my fire, learned how to actually build projects. She goes, "Wow, you're doing such a great job. Go get your contractor's license." And I started building the projects and the houses. And she goes, "Wow, you're doing such a great job. Go get your broker's license. When you go find more land." So I got my broker's license. Went out and started finding more land. The point with all, I've also taught 11 years for the Urban Land Institute, real estate development across the country. What I'm trying to relate to you is I have a very good understanding of how development occurs, why it occurs, the things that are impediments, such as sometimes interest rates or costs of things. I interview landowners all across the state of Florida, particularly a lot in the county, and I hear stories about, oh, that's good, we're going to build 1,000 units by next year. Oh, sure you are. No, you're not. No one's going to build 1,000 units and sell them in 1 year. Conversely, someone might say, well, I'm building this project and it's not going to absorb quickly. You might look at it, are you kidding? You build that project, it's going to absorb like that. There's a lot of professional experience that I have that I bring to the table that you can't take a class, you can't, I'll ask you to trust me once and show you what I can do. And for what it's worth, I'm a gator. But my gator sucks. So I recognize we're in a public hearing. I'm going to say something I'll probably regret in the future. But for example, I just gave you the example. Let's say you wanted to have a public to make sure the public stays here and doesn't maybe they get sideways on you and want to get off the island. Well, the way to do that is to have more permanent population. Well, you know what is not permanent population? Condos. So you might want to. The advice could be, well, if you really want to support this is the town's goals and objectives, what you need are more permanent residents. And so if someone's proposing a project that doesn't add more permanent residents, that can be a reason for denial, right? The town wants to be economically sufficient in order to do, independent. In order to do that, you need to have closer to 15,000 permanent residents here. And there's a lot of different ways to achieve that, but that could be used, I'm just trying to give you an example, as a mechanism to say yes or no to maybe certain kinds of projects because it doesn't achieve the necessary goals of the town. And I would even go back to fiscally, to be fiscally neutral or fiscally conservative, that you need to have enough people here so the businesses stay around, so that you keep economic vitality of the town going. Because if everyone, as long as I've been on the beach, almost all the service workers live off town, or don't tell anyone, but there's illegal units in most of the houses. There used to be, there's not so much
anymore.
They're gone.
And so for service workers and things like, I don't want to get too deep into it, especially at this forum, but that's the kind of information we can help you bring, again, to achieve your goals. And it just so happens the answer is, well, that means we want less of this kind of development and more of this kind of development. I don't tell you what you want, I just tell you what policies
To
can
achieve what you want.
Yes.
John, do you have any questions?
No.
I just thought it was interesting what you just said there about condos and how it relates to
So
permanent residents.
more of Mr. Safford there. So I've seen a lot of things. Well, the problem is people can pay $10 million for a condo, but as soon as they do that, it's a sunk cost, meaning that I'm not spending any more money. I don't have to. I already own that, and I can sort of forget about it. Tell me every time you've seen someone rent an apartment and not use it. Almost never, right? Who rents an apartment for a year and doesn't use it? It could happen, I guess. Now watch someone structure a deal so that gotta be careful what I say on public record. But my point is that certain kinds of development procure permanent residents, and some kind of developments don't. So I don't have a specific scope of work. I propose I work something out with the town manager and your planning team, and see how it goes. I will tell you, every client I've ever had, I have. Usually when they get a taste of what we do, they like it and they want to see some more of it. We're not heavy-handed. We try to under-promise, over-deliver, and when we say we're sure, we've triple, quadruple checked to make sure, especially if it's something really important, we want to make sure we have the right goods. So when litigation happens, and we've been there, we were involved in the Steros lawsuit, and in the end, the developer walked away. They couldn't prove our data was wrong. So we realized that people that Cape Coral's basing $3 billion worth of water and sewer improvements based on our forecasting. We understand the magnitude of the number. Some people are just numbers. To us, it's not just numbers. They mean something. It means something to the people and to the towns.
Well, I personally think this data could be very informative and very helpful in what I think we're gonna have coming before us the next couple of years at least.
It's scary. And forgive me, it took me 2 months after Ian to get up here. And I was prepared, and I got here, and I wasn't prepared. It broke my heart. I've had more than 1 billion ice cream cones at Dairy Queen. I can feel myself in the flesh. And
Don't get Frankie all wound up.
no, so when I got there, I'm an engineer. I understand damage. I understand structures. And when I got there, the block, there was no evidence that, other than the red tile floor, there was no evidence of that. Do you realize the kind of energy it takes to completely shear off steel and wipe something completely away? It was just absolutely devastating. I'm sorry that Plaka sold for $20 million or whatever, because that was one of our favorite restaurants to eat
No,
at.
only 3.4, I
That's
think.
not only for like 5 square feet.
So I'm kind of into timing today.
Okay.
With everything that's going to be coming at us in the next 12 to 24 months, what is your timing to put together these studies and get us information and be able to utilize that in upcoming decisions?
Well, we get started with the scope of work, and I can start immediately. I mean, we're busy. We have projects going, but I'm very good at scheduling things, and we can work on multiple things at one time. And Sarah, I'm going to put her on the spot. She can vouch that we always meet the deadlines, if not exceed them. I can't have something ready for tomorrow. There's a lot of work that goes into this, but this is not a year-long
But
thing.
Friday would be good.
Well, I tell you what, I can give you last year's data by Friday. No problem. I can probably get it to
It
you
probably hasn't
tomorrow.
changed that much, actually, from last year.
Well, see, the problem is there's a lag in that property appraiser data, so by now the data is almost a year and a half older than what we used to do the RTP with. So,
I mean, because at our last election, our voting population was 3,200.
wow.
So that's how off that information is.
Right. Well, that's right. Okay. Yeah, by half.
Yeah, and some of those people aren't even back on the island.
No, they're just voters. They're registered voters, but they're not living here necessarily. I mean, I think if you actually got down to who's actually living on the island, it would probably be a third of that or half of that.
Agreed. The services are just now coming on. Is Publix open yet? Forgive me for
Yes.
asking.
Yeah,
but,
Publix is
I
open.
mean, until you have things like that, it just becomes so hard to live here.
That's why I think your data, just based on the limited information you gave us, would be interesting to see what we can do to drive that number up. How do we get back to that, to get people more into school, to do things like that? And if your data can generate at least some vision as to here's the things that we suggest you do to drive those numbers back to where we need. Because I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but basically what I heard you say is full-time residence is what drives your economy, essentially.
Yes.
And
I mean,
keeps your economy sustainable, not necessarily transient, not necessarily.
The visitors are great because they come and they spend a bunch of money and they leave, but it's not that permanent thing that we need to support all these businesses that we want to see. The restaurants, and I've heard the beach whales returning. That's correct. I hope. Right?
It's
Mhm.
coming.
One of my
Next summer.
favorites.
This
Just the
summer.
whale
This summer.
Just the whale.
It's just
Yeah.
the whale, other than the beach.
Forget the beach.
Okay.
Scott, how do you feel about putting together a scope of work to at least take a look
Yeah.
at?
I mean, I loved out.
Counselor King, what do you think?
Move forward.
Well, you have your direction.
All right, sir.
Vice Mayor?
I like it.
Thank you. Thank you for even considering. This town means a lot to me, and we'll put our heart and soul into it. I promise.
Well, we'll run you through your paces, don't you worry.
We're nerds, so I'm looking forward to it. Anything else? Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I know you've had a really long day. I watched the first 3 hours of your day. It was long. So thank you for hearing. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, David, for coming. I think that was our only agenda item, if I'm not mistaken.
No.
I think we've got an add-on, if
We do?
you'll indulge us with Joe in a little presentation. I asked him to give us about our VACCON that we purchased and the,
Oh, okay.
The
Yes.
return on
Yes, you did tell
investment.
me- Sorry, you didn't tell me.
That's okay.
Yeah, this should only take a
Yes.
couple minutes. So I thought it would be helpful, since some questions have been raised about the jetback, the cost of operating it and savings that could be achieved by owning it and operating it ourselves. So if you go to the next slide. So I just wanted to start out with just how I came up with this calculation, because we really don't know how much fuel is going to be used by the JetVac or what the maintenance costs are yet. But what we do have, we have the FEMA reimbursement rate for operating this piece of equipment. And so the FEMA reimbursement rate is intended to cover the cost of depreciation, the cost of maintenance, the cost of fuel. So those are
Hey,
like,
Joe, for those brave souls who
Yes.
still may be watching,
Sure.
would you just explain what a JetVac is?
the JetVac, well, I don't know, maybe Andy could explain it better.
It's that piece of equipment that we purchased to help clean out our stormwater and our drainage and it's called a VACCON actually, but it is a jet vac. It's a very technical piece of equipment that we already use on the island through a contractor, and this is just one we'll be having in-house.
Oh, okay. So I just wanted, because we do know the FEMA reimbursement rate, and since it does include depreciation, with that I kind of backed into what then, if we were to run that machine like full-time for the entire year, and then use the FEMA reimbursement rate for that, we can calculate the total cost of running it for a year, and then if you back out depreciation, you could then kind of have an idea of what the fuel and maintenance cost would be. So that's what that was my basis, my rationale for coming up with this. So you can go to the next slide. So then this is my calculation, some of the components of my calculation. So the cost of the JetVac or the VACCON was $656,232. We're just conservatively, we depreciated over 10 years. The life of the machine is probably much longer, but our standard depreciation rate is 10 years. So that would be a depreciation expense of $65,623. So if you take the FEMA reimbursement rate of the $97.76, multiply it times the maximum number of hours, operational hours in a year, say that there are 2,080 hours, that would be running at 8 hours a day, 52 weeks a year. The total cost, or according to the FEMA reimbursement rate, would be $203,000, and then you subtract from that the annual depreciation that we calculated above. So you subtract from that, that's $65,623. You end up with what FEMA would, according to the FEMA rate, would be the cost of the fuel and maintenance, and that's $137,718. So now if you can go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, this is more faint. I didn't realize it would show up this faint on the screen. But what I tried to do is then take those figures and then show you what it would cost to run it 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week. And this would be only 7 hours a day, because that's, we have if a full day would be 7 hours because there's a paid lunch in there. And if we only worked 45 weeks during the year, because a person an operator could potentially have 4 weeks vacation, and then we have roughly about 2 weeks of holidays, so that leaves only 45 weeks. So I was trying to bring it down to calculate the total number of hours in the year. Then would be like 315 hours if it's 1 day a week, 630 hours if it's 2 days a week, and all the way along up to 1,575 hours for the year if it was run at 5 days a week. So then I just calculated, well, what percentage of the year are those calculated hours. So it's anywhere from 15% all the way to 75%. So now if you multiply the percentage of the year by the total cost of the fuel and maintenance, which is that $137,000 I had calculated on the previous slide, then you get the amount of the fuel and maintenance for running it that number of days. So like for 7 days a week, it's 20,856. 14 hours. 2 days a week or 14 hours a week would be $41,713, and all the way to where you get to 5 days a week, the cost of the fuel and maintenance is $104,000. So I wanted to show you this just because, so it's not like a mystery and smoke and mirrors. I wanted to show you the backup supporting data that I used to try to come up with this calculation. So now I know, according to this calculation, how much it's going to cost for fuel and maintenance for the number of days you run it for that a week. But what we know would be fixed and be the same amount no matter how many days a week you run it would be the depreciation. So that's always going to be $65,623 a year. And then if you add to that the cost of the employee, we already have a vacant position in stormwater maintenance that we have budgeted. In order to hire an operator who's skilled at operating this machine, that would increase the budgeted cost of that employee by $21,632. So that cost is going to be the same all the way through the year, no matter how many hours or how many days a week we run that machine. So that's where I calculated the cost, the total cost of operating it according to the number of days of the week. So that's like the total cost is $108,111 if it's run 7 days a week, all the way up to $191,537 if it's run 5 days a week. So now we know the total cost depending on the number of days per week it's operated, and now we can compare that total cost to the cost of EarthView. And this would be what we have been doing is we have been utilizing EarthView to run that machine for us. They're charging $350 an hour. So if you multiply the $350 an hour times the number of hours, on that third line above, we end up with the cost that EarthView would charge us. So that's $110,250 for 7 days a week, all the way up to $551,250 for 5 days a week. So now if you do that comparison between what it costs for our running it to the cost of EarthView running it, that's where that bottom line savings would be. So basically we would break even by running it 1 day a week, and we'd save like $2,139. And then depending on how much you actually use it, we could save as much as $359,000 a year if we ran it every day. In
Quick
comparison
question there,
to
Joe. When
Yep.
it comes to FEMA then,
Yes.
are we still allowed to charge that rate that you're talking about there, whether we own the machine or if EarthView is doing the work? Or is it based on what we actually spend?
It's based on what we actually spend, as far as what we get from FEMA. So if we're contracting with EarthView at a cost of $350 an hour, they reimburse us that $350 an hour. If we do it ourselves, they would reimburse us, that's $97.76 per hour of use of equipment, and then they'd also reimburse us for the cost of the employee. So it's either way, FEMA reimburses our cost.
But doesn't FEMA do 85% of the cost?
Well, true. I mean, it would depend
Depends on the
on the
disaster.
nature
Correct.
of the disaster
that
and what
crazy?
the percentage is. True.
Plus, you're helping our grandchildren and children with the national debt by saving the federal government some money as well, obviously, right?
Well, that's true. And we also then have the ability to utilize this, when we need it and not based on the availability
That,
of the
I think what
contractor.
Jim meant to say is you're saving our inbox from why is my drain not draining, because we can get, we can
what
get
we
there
heard.
on our
That's
schedule.
what we heard.
That-
Well, and
that's what I think.
I'm sorry to interject.
Accept that, yeah.
That's the thing is, we call them when we need them.
Yep.
Where this can be preventative maintenance as well. We go in when we have to call them and need them, but this could be sucking it out and being proactive about it, so we don't have to do
And is
it.
it safe to say that that is usually too late?
It's after the fact always.
Right.
Usually,
Yeah, I
And
mean,
then we have to wait 2 to 3 weeks till they can get us in the schedule.
Correct, and we're making,
potentially, yes.
and we're using ARPA funds to purchase it, so it's not general fund money that we're using to purchase the piece of equipment.
That's a huge intangible that you're talking about with the time and the immediacy.
Yeah, I look at it as the proactiveness of it. If we know a storm is coming, we can get out and get these drains cleaned
So John, would you say that's priceless?
I won't go there exactly because I'm not Frankie, but, Joe, a couple of questions. Maintenance, insurance is covered under the maintenance part?
I believe so. I mean, it's supposed to be all of our costs, so that would be insurance as well. And as soon as we find out what that insurance number is, I can break that out separately and redo this calculation, but we don't have that yet.
And lastly, does it save us more or cost us more if the mayor drives it?
Way more.
Probably costs us
Probably in the long
more.
run, a lot more.
All the wrecking.
Insurance would go sky high.
I haven't hit anything yet, John.
Just asking for clarity.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah. I would like to drive it though. That's really sweet.
God, Mark would be
It's
out there so
it's a sweet
fast.
operation.
That's all I
fix
have.
it.
Yeah, Mark could fix
Thanks.
it,
There you go.
Yeah.
maybe one day, someday.
Thanks, Joe. Is there
Goals.
anything else you wanna?
That's it, sir.
That's it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Agenda management. John,
I've got nothing.
Vice Mayor?
Just, it sounds like you guys just met with FDOT the other day. At some point, it would be great to have them come in and just give the public an update as to where the project is, what the timelines are, what their projections are, what they're trying to accomplish, just kind of a re-education. Because people are gonna be right in the middle of traffic this season, and for them to at least be aware of what's happening and why, might be helpful. And I asked before, and again, don't want to interrupt with his workflow because the renourishment's on a time crunch, obviously, but if Mike Poff has a chance to come by, again, at his convenience, give people an update on the renourishment, I think people find that very interesting.
We've got him scheduled for the 21st.
Yeah, he's
Beautiful.
scheduled on the 21st.
Wonderful, thank you. That's all I have.
Councilor Woodson?
I'm just looking at, now, we got a lot of TBDs on here, though. For meeting dates and things, so it would be great if we could parcel those out.
Yeah. Okay. Scott?
I agree with Vice Mayor. I'd love to have FDOT come in here.
I would like to get FPL added to that list. Where
That's
they're at on
another one.
Estero Boulevard project, I mean, they've been,
Mhm.
no pun intended, dark
I know
lately.
the two of us have had contact with Mr. Powell in the last couple of days here, and I know we can definitely get him in here.
Yeah, it would be nice to have him here to answer questions of the timeline and.
And if not him, somebody with the problem.
I prefer whoever's the decision maker. I don't wanna go through the same exercise we went through yesterday.
Meeting with Mr. Powell tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock.
Okay.
I would add on that, Frankie told me something the other day, I'm sure you already know this, Mr. Mayor, but I thought it was interesting that when FPNL and their affiliate begin to install those lights, again, starting on the south end, moving north, they are actually gonna be operational as they're installed. So we won't have to wait till the whole project's done before those lights to turn on, which I thought was interesting.
And that's what
That's what we've been told.
Yeah.
But again, it would be nice to get an update. We've
Yeah, I
had two
agree.
hurricanes since then that, may or may not have
Change that.
altered the delay or the, but along the FPL thing, we talked about the funding for, it's my understanding that Old San Carlos, that lighting is under the same contract. You think you might wanna look at that, Jeff? I know you're shaking your head. It's not. Not the electrical part of it, but the poles.
So they supply us the fixtures. They're gonna do the fixtures,
But not the poles.
but not the actual pole.
That's what I was getting
Yeah,
at.
they'll do the fixture up top, but we gotta actually.
We gotta do the poles.
Yeah.
Right. So, they are doing the lighting, we just gotta supply the pole, whatever.
They'll supply
fancy
the
pole.
fixtures, and then
Right.
we have to do the rest.
So they'll continue to match throughout, that was the whole discussion. Or the same,
Yeah, we've had conversations with them about more decorative ones down there, just 'cause it's kind of downtown.
right,
So we have had conversations.
luminol, put all that stuff to
Yeah.
be the same. Alright. And then the only other thing is we're in season now, the beach wagon thing that we had talked about looking into, I know you said that you would talk with Nancy about.
talk about it this week, yeah,
And try to get it moving.
yeah.
As traffic is backing up, I think people would start to use that. I'd use it.
I'd use it.
I would use it for sure. But we have to get so we have to get a contract so that we can get it out to our beach vendors to see who's willing to
Yeah.
come in and,
And do it.
and this funding could come through parking revenue, whatever council policy decision. Don't need to decide now, just,
Yeah, we talked about
Yeah.
that, we talked about the workforce housing money, we talked about a
That's
couple
what
of
it
things. You born a hat rack sometimes, sorry.
yeah, which was funded by the parking and the short-term rental fees. Okay. So those are the only two things I have.
Well,
Anything
I think you've already been having the discussion too with Dave Horner about pier and status of the pier and
And
timing.
I'll be meeting with Dave once a month. We're gonna, we've established that. The first one, I believe, is the 31st, but we're gonna be routine on that. He'll come out here some, we'll go there, so.
Okay. Great.
Very good. Anything else? If not, John?
Do it.
To adjourn.
So moved. We are, any objection?
None.
We are adjourned at 3:27.